In this video I'm going to run through some of the different ways to select entities and use grips and snaps, hopefully to help you get to where you want to be sooner, that is cutting parts. So the fewer clicks that you need to make, quicker you can make your geometries and get them out your machine. So first of all, as with most CAD systems, if you want to select something, if you're dragging a box from left to right, whatever you're trying to select has to be entirely within that box. So if I left click here and I want to select this circle, this box has to be entirely surrounding that circle to select it. So if I'm going left to right and do this, it's not going to select it. If I'm going right to left, however, you can do a crossing box and it just has to be barely touching it, and then that'll select it. So this comes in especially handy. You want to add a cut order to this part here. You don't have to necessarily worry about selecting the whole thing. You just left click and then drag a box right to left, and then you can do your 3 key to set your cut order, and then of course your 4 key to go into your process screen. So one setting that I always like to adjust is the length of my crosshairs, and that's under preferences. And I find that the longer crosshairs makes it a little bit easier for me when I'm trying to do a box and drag across multiple entities that might be spread far apart. So if you go into preferences and then preferences, you have this crosshair number, which I think by default normally it's like 30 or something. So I usually set it to some big number like 3000, which means my crosshairs basically extend all the way across the screen. So therefore, when I'm trying to select something, like if I'm trying to select these 2 circles here, the crosshairs give me a nice visual as far as where my box is going to be when I left click and drag across here. So that can help you make things a little bit easier to select things. And then also, say we're trying to delete some items here, I can do my E key for erase, and if I right click, we have this quick filter down here. So this is handy when you have things of different colors or in different layers, different sizes. You've got these different options as far as making it easy to filter out what you want to select. So for example, if I wanted to select those green circles there, I can check the color box and I can choose the green color, click on OK, and even if I select everything, it's only going to select the green items because I had selected the green box. If I do a quick filter again, and you can also do things like layer. So these 2 green circles are on layer 1. So if I choose layer 1, OK, drag a box around everything, it's only going to select those. And as you see in this box here, you've also got choices for entities. So if you want to choose circles, polylines, etc., whatever's in the drawing will be listed here in this pull down menu here. So if you want to choose radius, say smaller than 1/4 inch, so we can go up and choose circles, radius smaller than 1/4 inch. OK, drag a box around everything, and that picks all those circles. So that can help you, especially with drawings that have lots of entities. Other options that you have in here when you're doing this, you've got basically crossing polygon and window polygon, which are the left to right and right to left that I showed you earlier. Fence would be basically you just draw a line and select things, or you can do the freeform where you can just kind of drag your mouse around and select things. So that can be a fun one to do. And then you've also got choices for previous and last, and Control A will select everything. So if you do previous, it will select the previously selected items. If you do last, it'll select the last thing that you had created, which when we created our part, that was the last thing that we created. So if I draw another, say I draw another circle in here, and I do E again, and choose last object, and that'll select that. If I do E and previous, that'll select that because that's the last thing that was selected. If I select this, and then I do my E and do previous, selects that, and if I do E again, and and then last object that. So since that was the last thing that I drew in here, that will always be the last selection until I draw something else or create something else. So grips are the little blue squares that you see on an entity when you select it. So if I click on the circle, this has 5 grips. So on the circle, if you click on one of these blue grips that are on the circumference and you drag that, then you can change the diameter of the circle. So if I have my F8 for my ortho button turned on and I move it out this way, and if I just start typing in 0.25, then that'll become radius will become 1/4 inch bigger, so overall it should become 1/2 inch larger in diameter. And if I want to verify that, of course, we can go up to our diameter. And so click on this, move this way, 0.25, and do our dimension again. So if you click on a rectangle like this, this has 4 grips. Here, if I wanted to make this rectangle bigger by, say, 1 inch, I can click on one of the blue grips. And again, since I have my ortho button down here on, it's only going to let me move in those 90-degree or whatever my ortho degrees were set to, whatever those increments are. So if I want to move this 1 inch that way, move my mouse in this direction and just type 1, and then I can do the same thing down here. If I have a line, same thing. I can click on a line. The line's got 3 points, 3 grips. So if I grab the middle grip and move to the right, then it'll move the entire line by whatever distance I specify. Or grab the grip on the end and it'll lengthen the line. So the grip on the circle can be quite handy. So if you want to move this circle to endpoint of a line or whatever, you can grab it by that grip. And right now my ortho button, or excuse me, my snaps button is turned on, but if I wanted to move this to the end of this line here, I can do E on my keyboard for end and go to the end of that line. So of course, one thing that can save you some keystrokes is that if you want to do the same command again after you just completed it, you can just hit enter and it'll do that same thing again. So if I do the move command, which is up here, and of course, as you hover over these different commands up here in your CAD bar and any of the bars, you'll see the shortcut key on your keyboard. And the more you work with this, the more you'll find you're probably working with the keyboard more than the icons up here. So if I want to move this circle, M for move, click on the circle, hit enter, and base point. Your base point is always going to be the center of gravity of whatever entity that you've selected. So, of course, a circle, it's always going to be the center of the circle. So you can just hit enter for your base point, and if I want to move this again 1 inch in this direction, put that in there. And if I want to move again, I can press the M again, but if I want, I can just hit enter on the keyboard, and that will repeat the move command. And if I want to move that same entity again, I can just do P for previous, hit enter, enter for my base point, and we'll go 2 inches that time. And then another thing to remember is that with any command that you find yourself using a lot, if you want to add it up here to your quick access toolbar, you can hover over it. So if I want to add my rotate command up there, hover over the command, right click, and then you've got the option here to add to quick access tools. The other thing you can do is you can make your own custom toolbar. So for example, if you want to have a custom toolbar that was the steps that you go through on creating a part, you can right click on this, add to custom toolbar, and when you do that, it starts this custom toolbar here. So we can do that. We can add our create command, we can add our contour command, can add our order command, and then we can add our process command. So then you can customize this to match your workflow and spend most of your time right on this custom toolbar that you've made. So the ortho button that I mentioned earlier down here, that can be customized as far as what you want the degrees step to be. So normally people set this to 90 degrees, but if you want that to be 45 degrees or whatever, you can do that. And then when you go to move something, it'll move it in whatever angles that you have specified there. So if I go to move this and hit enter and enter for my base point, so previously I had my ortho set to 90 degrees, but now at 45 degrees it snaps to those different degrees around as I move my mouse around. And then our snap button over here to the right, if you right click on this, you've got your different snapping options. So if you F9 will enable your snaps, or you can come in here and enable it, and then you can choose the ones that you want to use most frequently, and then any of these other snaps you can access or use by clicking by using the quick access key. So if I select this and I want to move it, M for move, base point, enter, and if I right click, then we've got access to all of those different snaps as well as a few other things. So endpoint is fairly straightforward, so that'll snap to the end of a line, and we'll select that again, right click, base point, and midpoint will snap to, of course, midpoint of a line. That's fairly straightforward. As is center. Intersection has a kind of handy thing. So if we do intersection, if there are two lines that are actually intersecting, first of all, you'll note on that yellow X there, if I'm not at an intersection, we'll see those three dots next to the X. And then when I'm actually at an intersection, then the three dots are going to go away. So as I hover over here, since it sees an intersection there, then I can click to that point there. Now this one, it didn't see an intersection on this because it sees this as one entity, so that's why I wasn't able to pick an intersection on that. However, if I do my move command again, and we'll move this again, base point, enter, specify point, again I'll do my intersection. The three dots after the X mean that you can do a basically an inferred intersection if there's not an actual intersection point. So if I wanted to move the center of this circle to where this horizontal and this vertical line would intersect, if I click anywhere along this line while that yellow X is there with the three dots, that's one line, and then if I move down to this line here, then it'll move it to the inferred intersection of those two lines. Similarly, if I select again, and I for intersection of this line with intersection of that line, then it moves it to the inferred intersection of those two lines. So that can be a convenient thing to use if there's not an actual point out here in space that you want to use. Nearest will just be anywhere along, as long as I'm going along this line here. I just want to put somewhere along this line. I can just click, and that one's fairly straightforward. Perpendicular, which is frequently used if you want to draw a line perpendicular to something else. So we'll do our line command, start it out here, right click, perpendicular. So that's nice. Also use that one a lot if I'm dimensioning something that's odd shape. You can also use that one for dimensioning. So quadrant, you want to move something to a quadrant of a circle. Hover near those 4 points around the circle and you can snap it to that. And then of course tangent. So I'll draw a line from this point and tangent to this circle here, so it'll highlight with the yellow circle where the tangent point's going to be. And then grip, so as we looked at earlier, if we want to move it to one of those blue grips that are on a part, we can hover near those and that'll be highlighted by the yellow circle with the X going through it. And then centroid, So that'll move it to basically the center of gravity of an item. So if I choose centroid and I try to choose this entity up here, because these entities here aren't joined together as one entity, it's basically showing me the midpoint of those items. Whereas down here, I hover near the perimeter, and that's going to give me the center of gravity of that polyline, because this is all joined together as one entity. You can tell that because if you click on one of the lines here, it selects the entire thing, whereas if I click on this, this is 5 separate entities. Now if you wanted to join this together as one entity, you can go ahead and select them. So I'll use my crossing there. And then I do J for join, which can be found on the CAD tab right here. Gets to the point where you don't have to remember where the icons are. J for join. And then when you start that command, down here at the bottom will be 0. So basically it'll join things if there's no gap between the entities. And then I'll show you down here, one object created, one became closed. So you have one closed entity there. If, for example, on that join command, if I move this, grab that grip and I move this up by, say, 5/1000ths of an inch, so we have a slight gap there. And then I go and select these, and I do my J command. If I do 0 again for tolerance, it'll join them together, but it shows you that it's not closed. And we'll do undo there. Control Z for undo, Control Y for redo. If I go ahead and try to join those together again, but this time for my tolerance, put 5 thou. So now it's one object created, one became closed. So basically closed up this entity because the gap here was 5/1000ths of an inch, and it looks at, and I gave it a tolerance of 5/1000ths of an inch, and it closes that up. So now if I go to move this, and I do my right click, centroid, now that's the center of gravity of this entity because all those lines have been joined together. The next one that we'll look at is the snap off or O option. So just to show you where that is on the list here, we'll start the move command, but we're not actually going to move this for right now. So if I right click O snap off, so it's similar to pressing F9 but to turn snaps off, but the difference is this only temporarily turns the snap off until you click, and then once you click, then it'll toggle the snap back on. So this can be handy in a couple of different areas. So if I'm manually adding my leads, for example, on the circles, and I've got my snap on right now, and I click on the single command, because I have my snaps on, if I'm moving this around and I click, say I move my mouse just very slightly, I'm either going to be able to put it at the 3 o'clock or the 12 o'clock position because my snaps are on. I've got the endpoint and midpoint snaps on. So if I wanted to just quickly disable the snaps, I can just press O, turns it off, I left click, and then my snaps are back on. And then again I could do O over here, turn it off temporarily. So that can be helpful in that situation where you don't necessarily want to have your snaps off and have to hit F9 again to turn them back on. This can also come in quite handy when you're doing edge fixes on geometry that you bring in, artwork or scanned images, where if I go into my tools and edge fix, and I want to smooth out a line here, and I want to start here and end here, since my snaps are on, it's going to want to snap to a point, but I might not want to go to one of those points. Again, I just hit O to temporarily turn it off and then drag and put it where I want it. And then again, my snaps are back on since that was just temporary. And O to turn off and click and so on. So it's a couple scenarios where the snap off button can come in handy. And then one of my favorites is point filter. So you can use this similar to what we did earlier with the inferred intersection, where we moved our circle up to intersection of those two lines up here. So if I right click and do point filter or the X key, first it wants to know what my X coordinate is going to be for my circle where I want to move it to. So I can, if I want it up here again, I can pick anywhere along this line, be it endpoint, midpoint, and it'll use that as the X coordinate. And then if I click somewhere along this line here, it'll use that for my Y coordinate. So that's one that I use quite a bit. And then snap from, if you want to snap it a certain distance from something else. So click on snap from, and if I want to snap it, say 1 inch from this corner here, click on this, and then basically wants to know what the distance is. So 1 inch. So move, base point, hit enter, S for snap, snap from here, and say if I want to go 2 inches that way, or move this, S for snap, snap from here, 1, 1. So that one can be pretty helpful too. So the last one is tracking, and this would be used probably mostly when you're drawing things, drawing lines and such. So if I do L for line and click out here and say I go to Q, quadrant point of the circle here, and then I choose tracking. So it's going to show me two of these light gray lines here. In this case, the one that's going vertical and horizontal would be a point that's tangent to where the end point of that line is, and the one that's at a slight angle is 90 degrees to that line that I just drew there. So if I want to draw a line at 90 degrees to that line, I can just come up here and left click, and if I do A again, here you just get the ones that are perpendicular to that point that you just clicked there. So if I click up here and then I do, let's do perpendicular to the circle here and then A again. So in this case, I've only got the two lines because my tangent point is the same as the 90-degree perpendicular line. So I hope that helps you. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Thanks.